and welcome back. I am so glad you're here because today we are unpacking a story that is, well, it's right at the intersection of technological miracle and legal nightmare. Usually when we talk about the future of gaming or AI, we talk about it like it's this distant thing, you know, something 5 or maybe 10 years away. But every so often the future just sort of drops out of the sky. It lands on us before we're ready, and that is exactly what has happened with Google. So I want you to imagine a tool for a second. Let's call it a magic box. Now, in the past, right, if you wanted to play a video game, someone had to actually code it. They had to write the rules for gravity, they had to design the levels, draw all the characters. But imagine if you could just type a sentence into this box. You type, I want to play a platformer in a lush jungle with a plumber who jumps on turtles. And instantly the box doesn't just make a static image, it generates a playable world. You pick up a controller and you are running and jumping and interacting with a world that just didn't exist 10 seconds ago. It sounds like, you know, Star Trek holodeck stuff, right? But Google has effectively lifted the lid on this exact technology. They're calling it Project Genie. Now, before you get too excited about, you know, infinite games tailored to your every whim, we have to look at the other side of this, because this isn't just a story about some cool new invention. This is a story about where that invention came from. And if you are a fan of video games, specifically Nintendo, this story is going to raise some very, very serious questions about ownership, creativity, and maybe theft. We're digging into a really fascinating report from Nintendo Life, along with some incredible work from The Verge. The headline from Nintendo Life, it doesn't pull any punches. It says, Google's Project Genie is basically a huge plagiarism tool. That is a heavy accusation. So our mission today is to figure out if that's true. Is Project Genie the future of entertainment, or is Google about to walk into the biggest copyright lawsuit in the history of gaming? Okay, so let's start by stripping away the hype and looking at the engine under the hood. How does this thing actually work? The source material explains that Project Genie is a generative AI model, but it's not working like the AI we're, used to. You know how ChatGPT predicts the next word in a sentence, or Midjourney predicts the next pixels in an image. Genie is doing something much more complex. It's predicting the next frame. Google trained this model by feeding it, billions of hours of gameplay footage from the internet, mostly YouTube. The AI watched people play games for, eons of virtual time. It watched so much that it started to understand the statistical relationship between one frame and the next. Think of it like this. If the AI sees a frame of a character bending their knees, it knows statistically that the next frame should show them launching into the air. It does this over and over, 60 times a second. It's not running a game engine. It isn't calculating gravity with math. It is hallucinating a video game based on its memory of what video games look like. It's dreaming the game into existence in real time as you press the buttons, which is technically mind-blowing. But here's where it gets legally terrifying. Jay Peters from The Verge gave early access to Project Genie, and naturally, being a gamer and a journalist, he decided to stress test it a bit. He didn't ask for something generic, oh no. He prompted the AI to generate Nintendo-inspired games. Now, if the AI was just understanding the concept of a platformer, it might have given him some generic hero in a generic forest, but that is not what happened. The result was a world with a character that looks suspiciously like Link from The Legend of Zelda. It had the tunic, the hat, the whole vibe. But the visual similarity, that isn't even the smoking gun. The smoking gun was in the experiment, Peters ran this not Link character off a cliff, and what happened? The character deployed a paraglider. Okay, let's just pause on that paraglider for a second. Why is this so important? Because it proves how the AI learns. The AI wasn't programmed with a line of code saying, if button A is pressed, deploy glider. The AI had simply watched so many videos of The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild on YouTube, so many videos of players jumping and gliding that it internalized that specific action and knew, oh, when the green guy jumps off the cliff in this art style, the cloth thing opens. The footage Peter generated was described as being so close to Breath of the Wild that it's almost funny. But for Nintendo, I can guarantee you nobody is laughing. This is, it's arguably proof that the AI was trained directly on copyrighted material without a license. And this leads us to the next layer of this whole thing, which I'm calling the Disney discrepancy. You would assume a company as massive as Google, a company that practically invented the modern internet, would have some pretty strict guardrails in place, right? To stop blatant copyright infringement. And interestingly, they do. But, only for some people. When Jay Peters tried to push the AI to recreate a Kingdom Hearts scenario, the game with all the Disney characters, Project Genie blocked him. Flat out said no. It seems Google's filters were very aware that you do not mess with Mickey Mouse. But Peters, being clever, found a workaround. He took out the specific names. He didn't type Sora or Donald Duck. He just described them visually, and boom, the AI generated a thumbnail with characters that were, and I quote, dead ringers for Sora, Donald, and Goofy. So the data is in there. The AI knows what they look like. It's ingested the Disney content. But when he tried to generate the actual playable game, the tool blocked it again. So Google is clearly capable of blocking specific intellectual property. They blocked the Disney stuff, but initially, it was perfectly happy to let users generate Nintendo IP. This just creates a really weird image of Google's legal strategy. It's like they were terrified of Disney's lawyers, but thought, Nintendo, they probably won't mind. Which, if you know anything about Nintendo's history, is a miscalculation of, well, astronomical proportions. Nintendo is the company that sues fan games, ROM sites, even individual YouTubers. They are the legal ninjas of the industry. Now, to be fair to Google, the source does note they have a defense. When they were quizzed about this, they gave the, standard corporate response they called Project Genie an experimental research prototype. They claimed it's trained on publicly available data. Publicly available data. I want you to remember that phrase. They mean the open web. They mean YouTube. Their argument basically boils down to, if you put it on the internet, we can use it to train our machine. But it seems even Google knows they're on thin ice. The article mentions that shortly before the story was published, so likely after The Verge reached out for comment Project Genie suddenly started blocking Super Mario 64 prompts. The error message cited interests of third-party content providers. So right at the last second, someone at Google realized, oh, maybe we shouldn't let people clone Mario, and they're frantically trying to patch the holes. But the the genie is already out of the bottle, and the public reaction has been intense. I spent some time really diving into the comment sections of these articles because that's where you feel the pulse of the game. And let me tell you, the vibe is not, wow, cool tech. The vibe is anger. There's this recurring word used by the commenters, slop. People are calling this a plagiarism machine designed to belch out slop. It's a really visceral reaction. One commenter, Samantha, she put it very bluntly. So you use the plagiarism machine to belch out slop that uses clearly stolen assets. Tell me more about how this is a good thing. And there's a specific critique here that really resonates. A human artist, right? They might look at Breath of the Wild and draw a picture of Link. That's inspiration. We accept that. But a human couldn't accidentally recreate the exact physics, the lighting engine, the animation blending of the game from memory. Not perfectly. To do that, you have to copy. And that is what the AI is doing. It's not inspired by, it's a mathematical approximation of the footage it ate. And this isn't happening in a vacuum. The source links this backlash to a broader anxiety in the whole gaming industry. We're seeing stories about Square Enix aiming to automate 70% of their QA with AI. We see EA diving into generative AI partnerships. The commenters are connecting the dots. They're saying, look, AAA development is becoming unsustainable. Games cost too much to make, and this is the corporate solution. The fear is that we are moving away from these handcrafted experiences toward automated content generation. There's also a fascinating and kind of unexpected point brought up by the community about the environmental impact. One commenter noted that we're not just talking about copyright here, we're talking about energy. These AI models need massive data centers. They use huge amounts of water for cooling and electricity for processing. There's this sense of resentment that the public is basically subsidizing this technology. One user pointed out that utility bills are going up in areas with these data centers. So in a way, you might be paying higher electric bills so that Google can train a machine to rip off Zelda. It adds a whole other layer of moral complexity to this cool new tool narrative. And then there's the soul argument. This one's harder to quantify, but you feel it in the discussion. There's a quote from a user named Springer17 that, honestly, it made me laugh out loud, but it's also kind of sad. They wrote, "I can't wait to play the very similar but legally distinct and devoid of all emotion, The Legend of Helga, Breath of the Mild." Breath of the Mild. That just captures the fear perfectly, doesn't it? That we're going to be flooded with content that looks like a game and plays like a game, but it has no heart. It's just gray sludge, as another commenter put it. So we have the tech, we have the public backlash. Now we have to talk about the inevitable collision, the lawsuit. Reading through the sources, there's this sort of fatalistic perspective, a feeling that even if we hate it, this is happening. One commenter said, "Some idiot opened the bottle, and there's no putting the genie back in." They predict that eventually these build-your-own-game solutions will compete directly with the $70 titles we buy today. But if anyone is going to stop it, or at least slow it down, it's Nintendo. And the source material points out this painfully ironic twist here, and this is probably my favorite part of the story. Think back a few years. Nintendo was infamous for banning their games from being played on YouTube. They'd issue copyright strikes against Let's Players. They hated the idea of people watching their games for free. They wanted total control. And now, That very footage, the footage Nintendo fought to keep off the internet, the footage from fans playing Mario and Zelda, that is the exact data set being used to train the AI that's ripping them off. It's just a cruel sort of irony. If Nintendo had actually succeeded in scrubbing YouTube of all Mario footage 10 years ago, Project Genie might not know how Mario jumps today. Nintendo's failure to stop YouTubers is the only reason Google's AI can clone Nintendo games. But can Nintendo actually win this fight? We love the narrative of the Nintendo ninjas. We think of them as this unstoppable legal force, but the sources give us a serious reality check here. Nintendo is a big gaming company, but Google is, well, Google. One commenter described Nintendo as a tiny little rainbow-colored guppy acting like a leviathan, while Google is the actual bloated whale. Google owns the infrastructure. They own the servers, the platform, the data. They have pockets deep enough to fight a legal battle for decades. So while we might want to see a David versus Goliath moment, the reality is that Google is a Goliath that makes Nintendo look like a very small David. Despite that, the consensus in the source material is that a lawsuit is inevitable. It's being compared to the Napster moment in music, or the dot-com bubble. Everyone's just waiting for the first shot to be fired. But let's zoom out for a second. Beyond the lawsuits and corporate battles, what does this mean for the future of creativity, for the people who actually make games? The source material has a really thoughtful discussion about the difference between a tool and a replacement. There's a real developer dilemma here. On one hand, using AI to fix a line of code or generate some background characters, that sounds helpful. It takes away the drudgery. But Project Genie isn't doing that. It's generating the whole world. There's a risk, highlighted by the commenters, that new developers will grow up thinking that typing a prompt is game development. There's a quote about human intellect atrophying by using these slot machines. Oh, if the machine does the dreaming for you, do you forget how to dream? And then there's the feeling of betrayal. Gamers are seeing companies they used to love turn into what they call turncoats. The sources mention a company called Crafton, which declared itself AI first and basically gave its employees a chance to resign if they didn't like it. It creates this us versus them mentality. It's not just fans versus technology, it's fans and developers versus the executives who see AI as a way to cut costs and automate creativity. So, where does that leave us? We are at a flashpoint. That's really the only way to describe it. Google has built a machine that dreams in Nintendo graphics. It was trained on the love and labor of fans. The very videos people uploaded to celebrate these games are now the fuel for the machine that replicates them. And sure, maybe Nintendo will sue. Maybe it'll settle. Maybe Google will put up better guardrails. But the technology exists. You can't uninvent the ability to predict the next frame of a video game. The big question I want to leave you with is this. If a machine can predict the next frame of a video game so well that it becomes playable just by watching YouTube, what happens to the value of the human imagination that created those frames in the first? We are entering an era where the barrier between playing and creating is dissolving, but the cost might be the very soul of the medium itself. And here's one final thought to chew on, something that wasn't explicitly in the legal analysis but has been rattling around my head. We talk about copyright ownership. Does Nintendo own Mario? Yes. Does Google own the code? Yes. But what about us? If this AI is trained on publicly available data, that means it's trained on our gameplay. Your speedrun, my fail compilation, the specific way you moved the camera when you saw Hyrule Castle for the very first time. If the AI is built on the collective performance of millions of gamers, do we have any ownership over the output? Or are we just the unpaid workforce that taught the machine how to play? It's something to think about the next time you upload a clip to the internet. You might just be training your replacement. Thank you for listening. This story is definitely not over, and I have a feeling we'll be coming back to this topic as the legal battles heat up. Until then, keep playing, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.